Alcohol is everywhere. It is such a common theme in American society and even in the West, where whether we are happy or sad at the end of an event, typically there is alcohol consumed. In fact, I found it hilarious that when you finish a marathon, and this is super common, they hand you a beer. And typically, they hand you a beer because it's cheap calories and you get calories in your system. But what they don't recognize is that typically people are running marathons because they want to be healthy and they want to be challenged. And then they give you alcohol at the end, which is a known toxin. We understand the biochemistry now. We know what the science is showing us, that they are handing you a known toxin to your body after you've just gone through a 26-mile race, which is hilarious to me. In this episode, I sit down with the Stop Drinking coach, aka Bardia, and we discuss everything relative to alcohol, where the initial urge to start drinking comes from, the dopamine hits, understanding trauma from the past, understanding even his experience, how he got into this work, and how this affects you on a mental emotional level, and how you can start the process of just cutting alcohol out of your life. Whether you believe you have a problem or not, it doesn't matter. Alcohol is part of our culture so much that if we don't drink, people think we have the problem, which is hilarious to me. What I've noticed is as I've cut alcohol out of my life, I've gotten happier over time. Yes, do I need to every once in a while process my own emotions? Of course. But I never wanted to use a crutch in order to process my own emotions. That's just me personally. And I know that the type of man and even woman that's listening to this podcast is growth-minded and on the same path. So using alcohol as a numbing agent will never get you to where you want to go in life. It just won't. In fact, it will get you to the exact opposite. So enjoy this episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast as we discuss how to stop drinking. And before we get into the show, I want to talk about what we have going on at the Unbreakable Man. In this new year, we are coming out with a schedule for the Unbreakable Man experience, and that is about to expand into an incredible online container to go along with it. With that said, the price is going up. So if you want to get into the Unbreakable Man experience and go through a 3-day life-changing event, it will change your life. Every man that has gone through it and has completed the event, their life is absolutely changed for the positive. They are the man they want to be. They are free to be that man, to be that confident man, that freedom-focused man, to just be the man who can live the life he wants to live. And it is such an incredible process. Every time guys come out of it, I'm always so blown away by their transformation. It's amazing. And even though I know this work and I do this work, it's just every time, man, it's so powerful. So if you are interested in signing up for that program, be sure to sign up before the end of January so you can get locked into the current price. Like I said, it is going to go up at the end of January. So if you want to get in, click the link in the description or go to our website, theunbreakableman.com, and you will find that experience there. All right, guys, enjoy this episode. What is up, beautiful humans? This is Dr. Dave Cohodes. I am on a mission to forge strong, heart-centered, and purpose-driven men. And this podcast is here to help you stop managing your problems and start breaking free of stress, limiting beliefs, and excuses that stop you from executing at your fullest potential, living with passion, and being the man you want to be. So let's go. Bardia. What's up, brother?
David, what's up, man?
How are you, my friend?
I'm great, man. It's good to be here. Good to reconnect.
Yeah, man. It's been a little bit since we originally met. You and I went out with a friend of ours, Julian. I speak highly of this man, and he's to be on this podcast. But I was very intrigued by your story and what you're doing in this world right now, especially for guys, and not just guys, but everybody. Tell me what you're doing, man. What do you got going on, and how are you helping people?
Yeah, man, it's been a wild ride and journey for sure. 6 months ago, started a new program, the Stop Drinking Coach.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's wild how life works. It all really unfolded in this beautiful, organic way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I run a coaching program, and I'm a sobriety and life coach, and I help people quit drinking alcohol, begin their healing process, begin expanding their map of reality, improving their mental and emotional regulation,
Yeah.
and really a deep fundamental process of coming home to themselves and rediscovering who they are and stepping into the next chapter.
I love that. That is incredible. And I've been kind of watching you evolve even in the last 6 months. And similar, you and I met right when I was starting the Unbreakable Man and you were starting your journey, and we connected, and I knew we were kindred spirits right away, which is always fun. So walk me through your story, even as early as childhood, and then, how did you become who you are today, and how did that inform you from your genesis?
Yeah, so it definitely started out in childhood. Grew up in a pretty crazy, dysfunctional family. My dad was an alcoholic. He pretty much drank every single day. Really, only time I knew him sober was like Saturday mornings. He'd take me to get my haircut from time to time. And yeah, man, it was pretty wild. He was pretty emotionally abusive towards like my mom and sisters. He was always kind of fine with me. I guess I was his favorite, but he had a lot of like anger inside him. And so
How did that sit with you when you saw him, treating your sisters and your mom that way, and he kind of treated you differently?
yeah, man, it was interesting because, when you're 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, you don't have the cognitive capacity to make sense of what's actually going on, right?
Yeah.
When you're that age, you're internalizing a lot of things. And so it's confusing. I remember, led me to believe that there must be something wrong with these people. That's why he's so angry with them. Like there must be something going on. And so the best word I could describe was just confusing, right? Because you don't really know. And like they try to hide things from you, and they're like, oh, he's the kid, don't tell him what's going on.
Yeah.
Right. So it kind of leaves you trying to find answers.
Yeah.
What
did you have any coping mechanisms back in the day, if you can think about it now?
I played outside a lot. I skated a lot. I got into computer gaming pretty early, so I'd game, 10, 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Many of us, yeah. Video games,
now,
so easy.
Totally. Knowing now, it's like that was just assaulting my dopamine systems and setting me up for,
It's just like dopamine. I need more. Ding, 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 ding.
Yeah.
Actually, that's really funny. This quick side note, I was at a coffee shop, with my daughter. I'll take her out on a date every once in a while. And, I had this like total judgmental moment of seeing another dad, but like, and I fully understand this now and I have absolute empathy. But when your kid is like running wild at a restaurant or, a coffee shop and, it's, everyone's trying to be quiet, he gives the kid an iPad, and the game that this kid was playing was literally hit the button. That's all it was.
Jeez.
And it was just like over and over and over again. It was just hit, and it just went ding, 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 ding. And I was like,
no.
Oh my God, we are killing our children. And it was that moment where I was like, I'm never going to be that father. But then at the same time, I also had deep empathy because I have been that father, especially like in an airport or on an airplane, where you give the kid the iPad and you're like, listen, it's the best I could do right now. It's all I got. It's all I got. So, being a father it's such an interesting, eye-opening experience. And I know you don't have any kids, if that's correct. Yeah. So having kids it's its own initiation, its own rite of passage for sure.
I can imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you ever plan on having kids?
Maybe at some point. I'm not in any rush.
Yeah.
Maybe in the next 5, 8 years.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I like it. Yeah. When guys have plans of 5 to 8 years, I'm gonna have kids, and maybe it's gonna be next year. You never know.
Don't say that.
Don't say that. Yeah, I won't rub that booger on you. Yeah, man. All right. So walk me through again, kind of like you had these moments in your life that informed you and helped you develop into the man you are today, and create this coaching experience for people to stop drinking. What other skills did you pick up along the way? Because it's so funny because when we're on a journey of deep transformation and also purpose-driven living, it's never like, boom, you're there. It's always like a certain series of skills that I've noticed that people pick up along the way. Like even give you an example. I was a dishwasher. That was my first gig. And, one of the things that it taught me was attention to detail. You got to make sure that like everything is clean, everything's put away, everything's stacked. And it was such a silly gig. I was 13, but I wanted to make money. Even at 13, I was like, I'm going to go make money. And I wanted to buy candy and all this stuff with it. But walk me through like some of the, the smaller moments even that has informed you into being the coach you are today.
Yeah, man. So the family deal sort of continues to unfold. Things continue to get worse.
Yeah.
Drugs get introduced into the family, potential like suicide attempt by my mom. Then my dad passes away of alcohol poisoning in his sleep when I'm 14. And that was pretty crazy, right? He was the person I was closest to, who kind of I looked up to, and now he's gone. My uncle comes down to help with the funeral. And this is probably what I think is one of the most pivotal experiences of my life. He comes down to help with the funeral, and he gives me this book by Wayne Dyer. And the book is called You'll See It When You Believe It. And I read that at 14, right when my dad passed away. And that book introduces you to the idea that your thoughts and your beliefs influence your reality, right? And I read that at 14 years old, and I feel like that's pretty young to read a book like that, right? It's like you don't have any map of reality at that age, and that really kind of shifted my paradigm, and it introduced me to the concept of like increased levels of self-awareness and like metacognition and all of these different types of things.
That's incredible. At 14, you got that. I picked up my first, I would say, transformative book similar to that. My sister gifted it to me at the end of high school, and it was called Journey of Souls. It opened me up to the idea that we are not in this finite body, and that we live a series of lives, and that in between lives, and this was done by a hypnotherapist that brought people back into, these are like thousands and thousands of case studies, right? And so they all had very similar ideas about what it's like in this, in this afterlife. And so it opened me up to this idea that we are living in essentially a matrix, and we just keep coming in and out of this reality, which is super nuts to think about. But how powerful is that? At 14, you get, a drop of wisdom like that. That's powerful.
Yeah, man. It was wild. Gave me chills when you said we keep coming in and out of the matrix. I felt that.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, man, it was crazy. It shifted my paradigm, and it set me down this deep rabbit hole of trying to understand and make sense of the nature of reality. And so between the ages of 14 and 20, and really ongoing, 14 until now, I really became obsessed with like studying like mindset and psychology. And like I read every personal development book, by the age of 19. And yeah, I got into Terrence McKenna and Alan Watts at a very young age, and just really like trying to figure out like, what is this? Like, why are the deeper existential questions, And I became extremely fascinated with like consciousness in that whole kind of side of life. And so you asked what's one of the skills I contributed. I think one of the first early skills was I got into network marketing at a pretty early age, as we all do at some point.
Yeah.
At 18, I thought, I was going to become a millionaire selling prepaid legal plans to people for $40 a month.
There's definitely pros and cons about MLM, man. I have definitely gotten wrapped into one or two, and you give it the old gung ho like for a minute, and then you're like, yeah, I'm just not going to sell my friends and family on these timeshares and or this health supplement, anymore. And quick side note, there was one that I got wrapped up into, and I just had a bad feeling about it. And sure enough, they got come down on by the SEC, and they ended up, because of the way that they were distributing their funds, I won't name names, but I'm really glad I didn't get wrapped up, because there was a guy that he was a decently close friend. He was making $40K a month, selling these products through his MLM, and then it went down to like $400 a month, because he like lost all that distribution because the SEC came down on him. So, or not on him specifically, but it was like, the whole huge company that was a multi-million-dollar company. So, which is, again, side note, we're going to backtrack. This is like classic ADD brain, which I definitely have from time to time. Walk me through, and there's definitely a couple things I want to unpack with you. One is like, I love the fact that you just insatiably read at an early age, and you were hungry for that knowledge. Walk me through the experience, but even before that, because this is very transformative for all men when they're going through life, and I have not had this experience yet because my father's still alive, but what was it like, at a young age of losing your father, if you had to really kind of feel into that?
There's this feeling of like being alone and not having anybody to learn from or like depend on. It felt like there was no real safety net, and so having seen what had happened to my family through drugs and alcohol and just all the trauma and stuff that comes in the way people grow up and the way they think and perceive, like I always at a very deep level knew that I didn't have like a safety net, and it was like it was up to me. Like I couldn't go to anybody in my family and try to learn anything, ask them any questions. Like they clueless about everything, like just totally caught up in their trauma. And it's not a judgment. It's just like they're on their own journey, And so, yeah, it was a feeling of not having a safety net, being alone, and knowing that like it's up to me to figure this whole thing out. And so I think that's partly why I became so insatiably like curious. And I think curiosity is one of the things that I've always had from an early age, is like to try to figure out and understand.
Yeah.
But in a way, like I was also very, very lucky, because what had happened right when my dad passed away is my sister was dating this guy at the time, and his name was Sean. I was 14. I think he was 28 at the time. Really smart guy, successful, was making, multiple six figures. And he kind of became like my older brother. He kind of took me in for a couple years, and I lived with him for a period of time. And we spent, first it was weekends together, but then all the time together. And I learned a lot from him, and I was really lucky that I had somebody to step in and kind of become a support system and role model for me.
Yeah, having mentors is so vital. I know when I was,
game changing.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine who I would be like if that didn't happen.
Yeah. The same for me when I was in high school. I actually had this thought yesterday. It's kind of funny that you bring this up, because one of the most influential people of my life, as from like a mentorship perspective, was my wrestling coach in high school. And I grew up in the north, and like this is in Wisconsin, where it's cold, and wrestling is like in the winter you either play basketball or you wrestle. And I didn't have the gift of tall, so I was like, I could wrestle, I'm gonna go do that. And I was pretty scrappy. And my freshman year, I remember in a very similar sense, and this is middle of winter in Wisconsin. It is cold, and leaving practice around 5:15, 5:30, and you're sweaty and you're cold and you're dropping weight, so you're hungry and you're tired and it's dark, all those like perfect moments of like challenge.
Yeah.
And I call my parents, and mind you, I only live like half a mile away, so it's really not that far. But it's when it's in the dead of winter and it's like below zero, you want to ride. You just want to get picked up.
Totally.
You're tired, and they're like, "No, you need to walk." And I was like. And I remember like walking up, and I'm a freshman in high school, and I have like very low food at this point, so my blood sugar is fully dropped. And I just remember crying halfway, like as I'm walking. And then it was like this moment of like, fuck it. I'm just going to just accept this, this is my reality at the time. But in the same sense, like I felt in that moment, I knew what my parents were doing. Like I know what they were doing now. Like I understand what they were, they were trying to create resilience for me. That can do, go get 'em attitude, which also then linked up. Yeah. Like I'm not supported, I'm not loved,
right,
yeah,
they don't give a shit about me.
No, they don't give a shit, it's like, and so there was like this kind of this double-edged sword, so it does create resilience. But even that, it comes with a bit of a cost. It comes with a bit of a cost of like kind of feeling in a way like slightly traumatized. There's this grand question. This is a bit of an open-ended question that, do you think it's possible that we can learn lessons like resilience and, discipline without the little bit of trauma, like?
That's a great question, man. And there's probably a lot of ways and different perspectives, but I think like, I wouldn't say trauma is necessary, but I think challenging experiences is what forces us to reflect at a deeper level and grow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like Sean used to tell me, he's like, dude, the shit you're going through is fucking insane. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. I was like kind of numb to it. Though I think that was my coping mechanism a little bit, is to just fucking block off my heart and just become super stoic.
Absolutely.
And I'm still pretty stoic, and I think in my personality, but he was like, dude, you're basically just going through war right now.
Yeah.
So later on in life, like shit's just going to be fucking easy.
Yeah.
And I remember him telling me that a lot, like when I was 14, 15, 16. And I was like, yeah, I guess that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I think it's necessary. Is like extreme abuse necessary for you to become resilient and like successful?
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's like you see a lot of people who maybe grow up in a very coddled environment where the family is super wealthy and just there's no resistance, there's no effort. Everything is just the path is paved, you know, the resources are abundant.
Yeah.
And you find a lot of those people really, really struggle.
Yes.
Right? Whether it's with substance abuse or addiction or just general like discipline and levels of like integrity or motivation.
Yeah.
And the matrix of this universe or like the reality that we live in, it's you know, it's dualistic. It's black and white. There's two sides to the coin. And I think resistance and pain, right? It's the opposite of that is resilience and power.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's how you view it. It's how you process it. It's how you make sense of those experiences that ultimately drive you down and debilitate you and keep you stuck, or become the greatest source of your power and inspiration and fuel to be able to go out and create and change and the whole deal.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. It's almost like this law of opposite, you know, the more it's funny, like I kind of touch on stoicism. It's not that I'm anti-stoic. I used to be very stoic, but what I noticed for me was that it was actually numbing me to the pain, but it was also numbing me to the bliss and the joy. And so instead, what I've done is just gone full headlong and been like, all right, let's go find some challenges that, you know, in a safe container, right? So that keep that in mind. So if you are out there, you know, doing your own practices, you know, jumping into an ice bath as an example, like that's one of my favorite ones because it's jumping headlong into the pain and really being in there in a safe container, meaning you could do it for like 90 seconds in an ice bath. And that can be game changing for somebody to get out of their head, get in their body, start to feel those experiences and really break through. And I love what your mentor said, you know, it's like you're in the battle now, you're in the war now, so that later in life you can experience total ease and like everything you want. And I think that, you know, and I don't know who this guy was, or how old he was, you know, at the time, but that's a very wise thing to say because it's so true. So many of us have to go through these battles at a young age because psychologically we're immature. We just don't have the maturity to understand all the nuance and the context of the wave of emotion that is hitting us. And so later on in life, then we can start to go back into that pain, those caves that we're afraid to step into, which, like you were mentioning, you're really numbing yourself in a way and then closing yourself off to just all of it, right? And it's not just love, it's like bliss and joy and happiness and playfulness and just that overall sense of self. And, you know, which ultimately brings you back into the world that you are now coaching in, which is, you know, we as humans do that. We push off these feelings that we are experiencing, and we do it in so many ways. And, you know, one of the ways that you teach on, obviously, is alcohol, and we'll definitely touch on that, but there's so many other ways. And I know for me personally, you know, I used food, I used exercise. I like everything that I did with that. I always had this like kind of thought pattern that was like very subconscious, which I would always say, there's never enough. There's never enough. And I went through my own personal like deep work, breath work experience where that came to the forefront. And I was like, oh shit, like I've had that belief pattern since I was a child, and I didn't get the bottle like right away in the crib. It was such a nuts moment. I saw this visual of me in the crib telling myself that there's never enough. And so in doing that, I was numbing myself to the pain. And like I was mentioning, it's, you know, I would do it with alcohol in the way that I always said, I'm not abusing alcohol, but I would still have like a glass of wine with dinner at night. And even that little amount over the course of days in a row, because I would do it, you know, on and off. I would do it, you know, at least, I don't know, say like 3-4 weeks in a row. And I'd be like, I kind of feel like shit. Like, I'm just going to not drink tonight or whatever. And what I realized I was doing, I thought I was living life, but I was actually doing the opposite. I was like allowing myself to kind of go into that habit of alcohol itself instead of really like going home and like playing with my kids or jumping on the trampoline with them or, playing games with them on the ground or whatever that might be. It was just like going home. There's another way that I used, and this is actually really noted. I don't think a lot of guys think about this. Sports. I don't know if you notice this, and I don't know if you're a big sports fan, but for me, I love sport and I found it very enjoyable. But what I was doing was taking my own sense of joy and, my emotional control and putting it on the outcome of someone else's life. Meaning I was putting it into the outcome of that game. And generally it was my team. But then I would also like love, like other teams and like other games. But I would come home and I would just click, turn on the TV, turn on sports. Then every once in a while I'll still catch myself like, yeah, I'm still like watching sport as a way to escape versus truly being there in the moment. Let me ask you, do you notice that, like, other than alcohol, do you think that there's any other numbing mechanisms, that we use that we kind of fall into?
Yeah, man. I mean, some of the common ones like scrolling on social media is definitely a form of distraction and numbing. Just binging shows. It's not to say that we can't enjoy entertainment from time to time, but like if you know that you have life to handle or you have goals or things that you want to, like, if there's things that you want to be making progress towards but you're choosing that over, it's like that's a form of numbing, right? You're procrastinating against the pain of taking action. Porn is a big one for men.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll raise my hand and say that one.
Yeah, for sure. And sex too, sex addiction's like real, or like the compulsive dating app sort of situation.
Yeah, that was before, like, that. I guess that was sort of after my time. I was already married, but like by the time the dating apps came out, so I don't know the experience. But I did read an article recently that it's so common, and I mean it obviously goes with women as well. It's like they have to show up on those dating apps as well. So it's almost like this hookup culture.
Yeah,
at a young age. But I'm out of my league on that because I'm not truly in it. So I can't speak to it specifically, but I can imagine it's very similar to just like a quick fix and just like a dopamine hit. And then it's the
dopamine feeding cycle, man.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the core of it.
Yeah.
Like you look at addiction, it's the end result. It's the manifestation of some deeper, unprocessed underlying wounds.
Yeah.
But it ultimately comes down to this game of like, it's the pain-pleasure balance and feelings of safety or lack of safety.
Yeah.
And dopamine it's such a powerful and sensitive molecule inside of us. It's so integral to our evolution. It's like the only reason we've been able to get to where we are today is it's largely influenced by dopamine. And it's not designed to be, and I say this in my videos, it's not designed to be tapped and fucked with the way that we fuck with it in our society today.
Yeah.
There's way too much stimulation. There's way too much instant gratification.
Yeah.
And you look at it's like the big question is, why is it that we live in a world and a society in 2022 where, we have the greatest access to resources, technology, information, life is more abundant and resourceful and easier than it's ever been, but mental health across the board is the worst it's ever been.
Yeah, I was listening to Andrew Huberman, which I'm a huge fan of. If you like, especially like dopamine science and you want to talk about the effects of dopamine, and he doesn't poo-poo on dopamine like as a thing at all, but what he says in regards to what you just described, which is if you are driving into the instant gratification and you're looking for the dopamine in like the kid in the button, right? It's like ding 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 ding. If you're looking for that and you're trying to get that from everything from video games to porn to alcohol, whatever, you are just going to create this cycle that's going to be incredibly destructive. Like it's just going to, at the end of the day, it's just like, it's going to destroy you from the inside out. And so one of the things that I've always noticed this is that when you start to pull those things away, there's always something underneath that. It's like we create these cycles and I know you are trauma informed and the way trauma works. And this is everything from my research and study of trauma, which is when we separate at a young age, we have this initial wound. I call it the primal wound, which is we don't feel safe to be who we are because our needs have not been met. And generally they're not going to be met because, from someone of authority. And how could our, person of authority, aka our parents or someone, ever truly meet 100% of our needs at every single second, it just doesn't happen. And so our brain doesn't recognize, because we don't have a prefrontal cortex at the time. So our brain doesn't recognize that, this is a totally normal experience. My mom's doing dishes over here, but I'm hungry and she's not going to stop doing dishes just to make me a sandwich. And so in that moment, because we don't have a rational center, we emotionalize and internalize that our need has not been met, and it hasn't been met because we are bad, right? Not that my mom is doing the dishes and like she's busy, like she does, like we don't recognize that as like a 2-year-old. We're like, I want food now. And this is a pretty funny story that literally happened to me, and I took it upon my own hands. My mom told me this. I don't remember this story, but she told me this story, that I went into the fishbowl, I caught the goldfish, and I ate it at the time. And she's like, you were nuts as a kid. I was like, yeah, probably.
Survival instinct.
It's survival kicking in. I'm like, I'm going to take it in my own hands. Like, everybody on my back, I got this. Like, let's go. I definitely did that as a kid. But when we emotionalize and internalize that event because we think that we are the problem, that is what creates the primal wound, which then creates the underlying mechanism of, I'm not safe to be who I am just by being me. And then that creates the shame cycle. Then instantaneously you feel the first time you ever felt was shame. And shame is that emotion that it's a shit of an emotion, but it's one of the emotions that if you really unpack the idea of shame and all of it, you will find the gold underneath everything. That if you want to feel your most joyous self and reclaim who you are, go into every area of shame that you've ever experienced. But it's one of the hardest things you can do. And in fact, I don't recommend doing it by yourself. There are like guided programs you can go into your own shame. But it's also the reason why group therapy and group programs are so powerful, because in the context and in the container with others, you can see that other people feel the same and that you're not alone. And because shame makes you feel alone, it makes you feel like you're not worthy, that you're not lovable, that you're not valuable, and that, like you keep going down that rabbit hole, and then why live, right? At the end of the day. And so the reason I bring that up is that when we start taking these dopamine hits, these dopamine, moments away, underneath all that is shame. And that's the first sensation. And so we reward ourselves because we don't want to feel pain as these animals. Like that's the thing we want to run away from. So what do? We try to numb that shame and kind of going back to using dopamine as an example, we try to numb it, with the alcohol, with the porn, with social media. And if you stop and you experience the shame, again, it's a whole nother level that you can reach. So kind of going back to your programming, and kind of how you walk people through and help them stop coaching. If you think about like a general framework, when somebody like first pulls the plug on the alcohol, do you notice the emotions well up at that point? Or what do you notice from your clients? And kind of walk us through maybe a formula, to help get guys to stop the process of drinking.
Yeah, I mean, so if we start with stopping the process, right? If you find that you're in this cycle with alcohol, right? And it really takes a deep level of self-awareness, right? Because you have so many hundreds of millions of people, right, who alcohol in our society is sort of like water to a fish. It's so woven into the fabric of every experience that everywhere. Like it's so normalized, right? The marketing and conditioning literally since birth between seeing your parents who you believe are gods drinking it, so it must be okay, right? We have these, structures and laws in our society that limit some drugs and some drugs are illegal, but alcohol is okay. So we're operating via cognitive biases that assume somebody else did the research and so it must be fine, right? It's in every movie, song, whatever, right? And so we get caught up in this trap as we all just kind of do, right? We start drinking and partying in high school, and then we reinforce it in college, and it just happens throughout our 20s and 30s, and sometimes it happens till the day we die. But if you notice that, like, and this is the fundamental question everybody needs to ask themselves, is like, is alcohol slowing me down and limiting me from becoming that version of myself that I know I'm capable of being, right? In each and every one of us, like, we have some level of self-awareness of like what our higher self is, or what that version of, like, if we only were no longer limited by fear, anxiety, addiction, like this idea of potential, right? Is alcohol slowing me down? And if it is, this is where that moment of like self-inventory comes into place, right?
Yeah.
Like, the first thing I would recommend is grab a piece of pen and paper and write out all of the negative ways that alcohol has impacted you, and get visceral and get detailed, and don't leave anything out, right? Because alcohol is one of those things, because it releases this abnormally high level of dopamine. In fact, I found this graphic. It produces about half as much dopamine as heroin and cocaine. And so, like, one of the things I've been saying, and I had in this presentation, is like, dude, if you knew that, like, if somebody starts doing heroin and cocaine frequently, let's say a few days a week, there's almost like 100% chance that they're going to develop a dependency and become hooked.
Absolutely.
If they do that for like a couple months straight.
Absolutely.
So knowing that alcohol produces half as much dopamine as those, would you assume that, like, then most of the population to some degree has some sort of physical or emotional dependency? Maybe it's not like full-blown alcoholic, but like it's a thing that they're turning to as a way to experience that sort of release, right? So write out and get physical, get very visceral and detailed about the damage that it's causing you. Because what happens is, the first time we drink alcohol, a neural pathway gets created in our brain, and it links alcohol to high dopamine or pleasure.
Yes.
And we will continue to run that script for the rest of our life until a new neural pathway gets created. And this is like rock bottom, that links alcohol equals pain, right? The pain becomes so real, so visceral, so great that we finally wake up and realize, like, dude, all these problems that I'm experiencing, all this pain, it's from this fucking alcohol. Right. And then that finally makes it easier to stay away, because as human beings, we're more motivated to avoid pain than to pursue pleasure.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like in the beginning, you create your ultimate potential. You really get clear and objective on, like, hey, who could I be? Like, who genuinely could I be without all the shit, right? Like, who could I potentially be? And then to really dive into that, and like, how is this alcohol? And it sounds like this is a very positive practice, even, for anything. If you think about it, like porn or food, food addiction is so real. Like, I'll reach for a little sugar at the end of the day, and I'm like there's these little chocolate bites that I just absolutely love, man. They're just so good. But you really paint the picture of who you could be, and then what is the pain that you like experiencing that? Like, what's the pain of using that mechanism of whatever that thing is? Could be social media, could be alcohol in this case. That's powerful, because you are correct. Like, we are these animals that want to avoid pain at all costs. If you want to do anything, follow in, like, just go to the pain of not doing. Like, if you want to do it, go to the pain of not doing it, right? Like, what is the pain of? I actually walk guys through a very specific practice at my Unbreakable Man experience. And it's all about identifying life purpose, knowing who you are, knowing what lights you on fire. And then we do this very special practice, which is ultimately that. It's like really with the NLP, if people know what that is, it's neuro-linguistic programming, of really linking up the pain of not living up to your potential as that man that you are now, because they've gone through this incredible process and like evolution, and they are now this new human. It's like, well, how do I show up now? What do I do? It's like, well, you are going to go do you, but we're going to do this one meditation right at the end. And it's so powerful. Just not a dry eye in the house, man. Every single time. It's just like so powerful. And then I play this one song specifically, and I'm not going to give it away. So it's so good. But yeah, like, I love that. I love that practice. That's a great place to start. And so we'll get to step number 2 here in a second, but how is your program different than like AA?
Yeah, good question, man. So AA is interesting. They've been around 100 years, and they have interesting sort of philosophies and methodologies around addiction. I feel like it's a little bit outdated in the way that they look at addiction in general, just because they didn't have the information that we have now.
And trauma.
Yeah,
And
trauma.
trauma informed. And
yeah, you know, they like one thing is they call it a disease, and this is highly debatable, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, addiction is a disease, and you know, and then they have the 12 steps, and you know, turning yourself over to a higher power, and you know, letting go and coming clean of the damage that you've caused. And like the 12 steps I think are a very helpful recovery strategy for a lot of people, but
Yeah.
their general methodologies in terms of how they help, I don't know, I feel like there's better ways, right? And
Yeah.
so like
I do agree. Not to cut you off there, but
Sure.
I do agree with 100% of what you're describing, which is we weren't as trauma informed back in the day from like 100 years ago. Like there's a lot of nuance to AA that's very powerful where, you know, you go through a process of like group therapy and like sharing your experience and, you know, and really getting it off your chest, like not holding any secrets. That's really the idea.
mhm,
And then ultimately at the end, you actually have to support another in that there is something very, very valuable about supporting another after
Yes.
you go through a transformation. One of the things that they say that I do not agree with, which is the sense of powerlessness.
yes.
I don't think you're broken. I know like my whole program is called the Unbreakable Man, but that doesn't mean that men are broken. It means that there's a part of you that is unbreakable, this consciousness, this energy that is the essence of you coming through your body. It's what illuminates you, and that's what I want people to step into, that sense of like you are already unbreakable. We're just going to go find it. And so a lot of people think that, well, if I am unbreakable, then I have to also be broken, and that's not true. And I would say that that's what AA teaches as well. And I think that's one of the hangups. And I've worked with a few guys now that I knew that they weren't ready for my program and they needed something deeper. And I recommended that they go to AA, and both of them, there was two guys specifically, they were both like, no, I'm not going to go because I'm not an alcoholic, right? You know, which
man.
is,
and that's the thing about alcohol
Yeah.
is that like when you go to AA, one, it's a free solution, right? And so it's accessible to everybody.
yeah.
Right. And so most of the community there is one, a little bit older, right? You probably find, let's say, not that age matters, but like 40 to 70,
Yeah.
right? And so these are people who are really at like have hit the end of the road with alcohol,
Yeah.
right? And so when almost everybody is finally getting to that place of awareness and acceptance that like, hey, this is a problem, as soon as they step into those rooms and they hear how fucked up like other people are,
Yeah.
they're like, dude, I'm nothing like these people.
Yeah.
Right. And it takes a humbling and an understanding and an expanding of mind and acceptance to realize like, dude, it doesn't matter if you're not drinking at 7 a.m., but you're still drinking 2 bottles of wine a night every single day. Like it's so like the alcohol thing, it's so hard for people to accept that like they have a problem, right? Because like in movies and media and television, we have the extremes of like you're either somebody who just parties and is social and enjoys alcohol, or you're this person drinking out of a brown paper bag, homeless, pissing yourself and a nuisance to society. Right. And so because these are the contextual extremes by which we contrast like this experience, people just go to that and they assume, okay, well, if I'm not that, then I must be okay. Right. And so one, like, there is an aspect of relatability to where like you realize like, okay, I'm not alone. There's people who have similar experience, but like at the same time, people go in there and they're like, dude, this isn't my deal. You know, like I'm not like these people. And it pushes a lot of people away.
Yeah, I would agree. And I see that in the same sense. And sometimes when you have a free whatever, you know, you just don't value it because there's, you know, it's like kind of old mechanisms like you were describing. These are from 100 years ago.
And the free, you don't value it. That is also something that like a lot of people don't. That's like a touchy subject for a lot of people. You know, it's like beautiful. I'm glad it's free and it's accessible to everybody. But people also have to like understand the fact that like when you invest, right? And this is like understanding money and money consciousness. Money is just a transfer of energy. It's not real and it's not the thing that we like think it is. It's a transfer of energy. And so when you invest in something, there's a deeper level of commitment because you have a relationship to money and that has value and it has meaning and you're trading your time and energy for it and it, like, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, sometimes when people aren't invested, they just don't take it seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree. So, if I'm we're still going to get to step 2, I promise. If because I want to talk about this idea of like, do I have a problem or do I not have a problem? And I mean, we really touched on it in kind of like this step 1, which is this getting in the way of my ultimate potential, and like really kind of getting an idea of that. But if I'm like that typical guy that's just having like, a couple beers after work, or a couple, like glasses of wine, or whatever your thing is, or maybe I just go out on the weekends and I just have a blast with my friends and I'm having fun, right? Like I'm linking up joy and sociability with it. How do I quit drinking without accepting, or like, the idea that I have a problem, if that makes sense, because a lot of people think that like, oh, I don't have a problem. And underneath all that, because if they think that they have a problem, then they have to feel shame about being a problem.
Sure.
And so is there a way that, and maybe we already touched on it in step number 1, which is like, really linking up, well, what's the pain of experiencing this to not living up to my potential?
Yeah, what's it costing me?
What's it costing you? Yeah, I think that really hits. But yeah, I mean, like, kind of if you had to think about it with, like, I don't want to claim that I have a problem, but I want to quit.
Yeah.
Like,
for sure.
Does that make sense? What would you say to that person?
Yeah, I would say the first thing is like the words that we use and the meaning that we assign going into NLP, right? The words that we use and the meaning that we assign will construct our experience of it, right?
Yes.
So you don't have to have a problem to quit. And, the value or the meaning or the weight of the word problem, like that's also can influence it. But like ultimately, like it's a personal decision, right?
Yeah.
Like there's millions of people who can have a few drinks on the weekend and go out and do the social thing and come back and still hit things strong, right?
Yeah.
And still feel like they're successful in meeting their goals and all of that. And so we all get to have our own experience of reality. Like, what do you want? Like I knew for me, like there was no managing and moderating it. Every time I had one, I had 10.
Yeah.
Right. And I knew that like that is not a sustainable strategy for me to be able to get to the person that I want to become.
Yeah.
But what you also have to realize at a deeper level, and this is like where really understanding what alcohol is like you have to understand that alcohol, there's no positive effects to your mind or to your body. Right. One, it's damaging your reward pathways and it's damaging your dopamine, right? You're always going to be in a dopamine deficit for the next few days.
Yeah.
Right. And so you're not going to be as clear. You're not going to be as energetic. You're not going to be as motivated. Even if you think you are, you're not. Just try cutting out alcohol for 90 days and watch how your entire experience of reality transforms. Right.
There was throwing the absolute, I do agree with you on there's no benefit to alcohol. One of the things that my wife told me like about 2 weeks ago, and we don't drink very often. I mean, we probably go out once every 3-4 months and have a glass of wine or something like that. But she was having some anxiety, and she noticed that her anxiety went away after she had a couple glasses of wine. So that is perceived. It's like linked up as, oh, well, my anxiety is gone. So there's benefit in that. But I do agree with you that there is no benefit, because if you're using alcohol as a numbing agent for the anxiety instead of actually going into the anxiety and asking yourself, why am I experiencing anxiety, and really unpacking that and pulling all the, the nuances out of that, until you do that, like the alcohol will, of course, have a quote unquote benefit, but it's not really there, like it's not designed, but it's just like there is no benefit. Physiologically, there is no benefit.
Yeah, it's more damaging, right? So like alcohol, it numbs you in the present moment, or it gives you that short-term pleasure gratification at the expense of tomorrow. So she's going to wake up, maybe she did, maybe she didn't, but like most people, if they're using alcohol as a way to numb or escape or procrastinate or anything else, you're getting short-term, reward from that dopamine spike, but there's no free lunch in nature. So tomorrow you're feeling more anxious, more depressed, less motivated, less energetic, more withdrawn.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's a Band-Aid and you're not addressing the root cause. And the thing is like with what we do, we start to wake up and realize that like the long-term trajectory of our life, right? It's all of the 1% decisions that we make, which constructs our ultimate experience of reality, right?
Yes.
So like society says, oh, dude, it's just beer, relax, like I'm just having a couple beers on the weekend.
Yeah.
But then you do that for 30 years and okay, well, let's deconstruct and break down how much money did you spend on beer and beer related activities and Ubers and food? How many extra calories did you consume, which has now contributed to the 40 pounds in extra weight that you're wearing? How much time did you spend out at the bars or socializing or doing things and then recovering from hangovers, which could have been spent or invested back into yourself or into your productivity or growth or healing or any other aspect of life, which would have contributed to a much deeper level of fulfillment that's in alignment with like who you want to be and what you ultimately want out of it, the experience of life, right? Like, so it's a deeper way to think about it, right?
Yeah.
Like a beer today or a beer next week or drinking a beer on the weekend for the next 12 months won't kill you, right? But one, we have to ask, why are we drinking in the first place? What itch are we trying to scratch, right? Is it a social experience? Is it we're unhappy with our work and we feel like we need a reward? Is it because some underlying level of like social anxiety where I don't feel like I can speak to people unless I'm a little bit looser? If those are the reasons, then rather than drinking the alcohol as a way to numb that underlying level of pain, let's address that underlying level of disharmony and address that so we can bring you into a place of harmony and homeostasis where you're connected to your authentic self, feeling empowered, feeling clear on your past, present, and future so that you can move forward and not consume a substance that we know has a net negative across the board.
Yes. So it sounds like that was kind of a jump into step 2. It might even be step 5. But, it's like once you identify, hey, like, listen, I know who I could potentially be. And I do agree with you. I have people that I interact with on a weekly basis that they'll come in on Monday. And you can just see it, that they went hard over the weekend, like you could just see it in their eyes, like just like a little bit glassy, a little bit, a little bit foggy, a little puffy, and just like the overall experience that they had over the weekend, it was, they went hard. And then it takes Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday to kind of like fully recover. And then they feel pretty sprightly, back to their sprightly self Thursday. And then Friday, they're like ready to go right after it. It's like
the hamster wheel.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the cycle. I mean, I definitely was there, in college. I was absolutely the gig. I mean, it was, but I was like, I'm living life, man. I'm like, I'm 20, 21, and like having a good time. Nothing can stop me. I'm feeling great. And, when I got out of college, obviously I couldn't hang with that anymore. Every once in a while, a buddy would have a wedding and then you tie one on and you have a great time. But now I'm like, I can't hang like that at all. And it's almost like I choose not to, in fact. But kind of going back to like step 2, now that we've identified, okay, like I know this is not serving me, like, and I'm ready to finally put this thing down. What is what's the next step on the path? Like, what can they experience?
Yeah. So I think getting a sense of accountability is really, really important.
Yeah.
Problem solving life, if we could do it on our own, we would have all already done it and be trillionaires and life would just be perfect.
Yeah.
Right. So understanding that, like, hey, we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
And mindset change, behavior change, belief change, lifestyle change, all these things take time and they take an incredible amount of effort and commitment and persistence.
Yeah.
And so trying to do things on your own, you certainly can. But if you want to have an advantage, if you want to put yourself in the best possible chances of succeeding, finding some support and accountability from somebody who has walked a path that you're looking to walk will dramatically increase your chances of success.
Yes.
That is very, very, very important because the fact is like, dude, we're human and nobody's perfect. And sometimes we fall off or sometimes we get distracted or sometimes we lose sight of the goal. And being able to have a sense of community or support or people around you who can reel you back in and remind you, and whether it's transfer that energy of motivation or inspiration or anything else to bring you back onto the path is really important.
I 100% agree. And in fact, kind of the first two steps that you describe is absolutely what I teach in the brotherhood that I have, like the inner circle that I facilitate. And that's, you got to know what you want, right? You got to know, like, what is that point? What is that potential? Where could you be? How could you be the best version of yourself? And then what is it costing you by not living that? Because you really have to lay it all out. You got to, like, get honest with yourself. You know you can live up to a greater potential, and then surround yourself with a group of other individuals that are peers. Now, here's the thing that I've noticed about life and this idea of accountability, because there has been research that has come out that if you want to be 10% likely of succeeding, then write a goal. If you want to be 25% likely, then write a goal and like have a plan. If you want to be 50% likely, then write a goal, have a plan, and have an accountability buddy. And then it just jumps to this 95%. If you want to be 95% likely of actually achieving what you want to, have all of those things, and then actually have a set time in the day where you show up and show your work. It's powerful when you actually show up and you say, this is what I did, not like skirt around it, not try to lie, not try to justify, but this is what I did. I did this today. You will be 95% likely to actually achieve your goal, because what it does is it forces the hand of accountability of saying, like, every day I'm going to show up and I'm going to show my work at this time. And generally it's always, like 5 p.m., 6 p.m. It's always the best, because at the end of the workday, now you're there and you can actually be like, yep, I did this, and no skirting around it. But the interesting thing about accountability is that life is going to keep you accountable regardless, right? Like, if you have a mortgage, the bank's going to keep you accountable, like if you have a job, whoever owns the company is going to keep you accountable, because if you don't do your work, you're going to get fired. And one of the things that I've noticed about accountability as a thing, when you are accountable to a peer, somebody that is on the path with you, it's as if they hold you in as an empathetic witness, and they don't judge you because they're on the path with you too. And they're not looking at you like you're wrong or you did bad, or like, like the bank isn't going to look at you as an empathetic witness if you don't show up and pay the mortgage. I've gotten calls when I was in a rough spot from the bank, and they did not have any empathy for Dave. Like, they did not. And it was a really rough time. But at the time, I didn't have a group of men around me, when I was going through that struggle. And it's, in fact, one of the reasons that I created the Unbreakable Man was because we all live this life and we all want to break through and break free. But in order for us to do that, we have to have a group of other individuals, whether it's men or just like peers. In this case, it could be people that are looking to stop drinking, that really give us the opportunity as empathetic witnesses and see us. We feel seen, we feel understood, as opposed to, like, if I drink, in this case, like what we're talking about, it's not like people are going to come down and you be like, you're a piece of shit and you must die. It's like, it doesn't happen that way, even though, like, we kind of feel that way inside sometimes, especially if we have like a really intense problem, like, then there's a level of problem, I suppose. But in this case, it's powerful to have a peer, in your corner. So, all right, so we have a group of people around us, we've already identified, now we're kind of on the path, like, let's say I'm like 3 weeks in and I start getting urges, and like, because like neurologically our brain's still like trying to rewire, and we always go through like this moment. What can we expect, if I'm on the path, what kind of along that line?
Yeah, so especially with alcohol or any addiction, right? We're going to get cravings, we're going to get urges.
Yeah.
And that's just, like you said, the brain reverting back to those old patterns of trying to either escape a source of internal pain or a source of pleasure, or pursue a sense of pleasure. And so, really focusing in on, okay, once we remove the substance, right, or the thing that's damaging us, really focusing in on like transforming our lifestyle into like a holistic lifestyle, right? So we need to get back to like doing the things that we should have been doing all along to optimize the mind, the body, the spirit into its fullest, healthiest functioning.
Yeah.
Right. So following a routine, following a lifestyle plan, and having order and structure and transparency and accountability to that plan. Because when we fall into a pattern of drinking, oftentimes, one, we totally lose accountability to ourselves and to the people around us. Two, we're operating really in a state of unconscious autopilot, both within what's happening within our mind and what's happening within our body. So if the mind goes into chaos, the body links up and starts feeling anxious, right? If the body starts feeling anxious, the mind starts spinning out. And when we're operating in our addiction and we're unconscious truly of what's happening, and we don't have accountability and we don't have a path and we don't have a system to follow, we're just repeating these cycles of behavior, right?
Yeah. So there's a really good book relative to, I mean, Atomic Habits is a very good book, and I do like recommend that. But the original book that came out was by Charles Duhigg, which is called The Power of Habit. And I think it's James Clear that wrote Atomic Habits. I'm not going to say he like paraphrased a lot of what Charles Duhigg did, but that's, I read them both and I was like, yeah, this is kind of the same book, but just different ways that he talks about it. But what he talks about in that book, The Power of Habit, if you want to change anything, the first step is always change your environment. Change the physical location, obviously, and that's what, and especially with AA, it's like get the alcohol out of the house.
Yeah.
Like get it out of the house or move, like physically get up and go.
Yeah.
Changing the environment is always the first step, because the brain, when it goes back to this unconscious living, and it will, at times, and that's where the cravings come in. It's like the new neurons are coming online and they're looking to wire into new, different neurons. And in the beginning, it's easy because we have this willpower, but it's usually around week 3, week 4 of any change that there's always this opportunity of breakthrough where things get really hard and you get emotional and you get really pissed off. And it's in those moments that we typically will fall back into the old pattern of whatever the thing is, comfort or safety. And we're trying to shield the really seeing ourselves and really feeling and accepting ourselves. And I love what you're saying with the lifestyle, because you absolutely have to be dialed in with your brain, body, and being. And I speak of it, you speak of mind, body, spirit. It's the same. It's like brain, body, being, mind, body, spirit. It's, you need to take care of that, like your whole self. Because if you're eating like shit and you're not working out and you're not taking care of yourself, trying to quit one thing like alcohol isn't, you might get there, but you really got to start looking at the entire being, and living up to your potential.
Yeah. You got to go to war with the process.
Yeah.
Alcohol, addiction, these are things that will take your soul and take your life if left unchecked. Right? You're not this isn't a willy-nilly type of thing.
Yeah.
Right? Especially the alcohol thing, man. If you can remove the alcohol, dude, your life will transform beyond your wildest dreams and imagination over time.
Yes.
But it's not fucking easy.
Yes.
You look at our society, and it is designed to keep alcohol running through your veins.
Yes.
Yeah. Especially if you haven't begun doing all this work and don't understand yourself, don't understand your mind, have a lot of unhealed and unprocessed mental or emotional trauma, right? Or physical trauma or anything else. When you are relatively disconnected from self and haven't begun to expand and increase your levels of self-awareness and internal mental and emotional regulation, alcohol is the easy button.
Yes.
It's just what you do. You follow the crowd, you go, you drink, and you're literally you're on this hamster wheel and you don't know what it's doing behind the scenes.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It is. You said something there that I found very poignant. It'll steal your soul. That is fucking powerful, because we have this part of us, we call it the soul, which is the higher self. That's what I call the unbreakable self, right? What I call this program, the Unbreakable Man. And it's the part of us that's calling us to a greater potential. It's hey, motherfucker, wake up. We're going here. And it's going to make your life even worse and more miserable until you finally let go and follow that call. And why the hero's journey. I love Joseph Campbell. I love the studying the hero's journey, because this life that we're all living is that. It's a hero's journey of living up to a greater potential. And we keep denying the call of that potential. And the way we do that is with something like alcohol, or could be social media, or could be like something so mundane that we easily justify not stepping into our power and not really living up to that fullest potential. And it's an emotional journey. It is emotional, and it gets hard. It gets rough at times. And sometimes it becomes like almost unbearable. And that's why, you already touched on it, having a mentor, right? Having a sage along the path, and also having an individual or individuals per se to keep you accountable, along the path. I think that's incredibly powerful, and you have to do it. You have to have all that. So we've gotten to this point, right? So we're going through like, some of the emotions. Obviously we've touched on like, you got to process the emotions and change your lifestyle. Are there other steps? How many other steps can we expect, along the path if I'm really trying to release and let go of the idea of alcohol?
Yeah. There's a few. One is understanding like social life is going to change a little bit, right? Like when we're in a pattern of drinking, we're partying a lot, we're going out to bars a lot, we're doing that sort of scene.
Yeah.
And so as you remove the alcohol and you begin prioritizing yourself and your potential and your future and your goals, there's going to be adjustments that need to be made. Maybe you start to distance yourself from certain people who that's like their style. You start to change up the locations or where you're going, right? You're changing your lifestyle actively. But then on the internal side, you're beginning this journey of healing, right? Of now that you're not numbing, you're left with who and what you are.
Yeah.
And
that's heavy sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. Especially if you've left a trail behind you, right? If you've been unconsciously operating in this series of patterns that you've modeled from society or the people around you, 10, 20, 30 years go by, and all of a sudden it's your first moment of waking up.
Yes.
It can be a lot, right? So being able to sit with yourself, feel your emotions without trying to change them, numb them, tweak them, maximize them, minimize them, but to just feel and become more familiar. It's often a rediscovery process of your true nature.
Yeah.
Right. And then it becomes a journey of expanding our mind, expanding our map of reality, expanding our understanding of the human experience. Right. So we dig into healing. We start to dig into better understanding trauma. We start to better understand our nervous system. We start to better understand how beliefs are formed, and that even deeply rooted unconscious beliefs can be changed, and oftentimes very quickly through techniques like neuro-linguistic programming or deep hypnosis. And then, healing the inner child, like that's a big one, understanding that each and every one of us as adults has parts of us internally that didn't get the love and support and safety and comfort that it needed. So being able to go back and reparent ourselves, being able to become more self-aware in terms of our internal representation systems of what we think and what we believe, and are the stories and narratives that I'm continually telling myself, are these empowering me and helping me move towards my potential, or are they debilitating me?
Yes.
Right? And if they are debilitating me, let's get to the root cause of that and see what we need to do to improve that.
Yeah.
And then slowly but surely getting, as we're expanding our map of reality, better understanding ourselves, okay, what do we want? Right? Like in a way, we have the freedom in this dimension to create and experience anything that we want. Right. And so beginning to visualize and exercise our faculties of creativity, right? Coming back home and
finding an expression.
Finding our authentic self. Who am I at a deep level? What is the music inside me that, if I assume that, hey, like there's no redos, I don't go to heaven, I don't go to hell, I don't come back, there's only one expression and incarnation of David and one expression and incarnation of Bardia. What do I want to leave here with? Like, what do I want, getting over the fear of judgment.
Yeah.
Being fully you, finding that deep sense of freedom.
Yes.
No longer being afraid.
Yeah.
Going out and creating. Like, what do we want? Yeah. Right. And then what's limiting us from that? And then finding coaches or mentors or guides to be able to help us remove those limitations so that we can move into the highest expression of ourselves.
I love that. And that's ultimately, yeah, like, I mean, you touch on pretty much the entire hero's journey along the path. There's one thing I want to kind of touch on that I'll come back to, but the full essence of self is an expression, and that could be a sonnet, a song, a dance, just holding space, being around a campfire, and asking questions to young people that are on their own personal journey. There is an expression inside of every single one of us that wants to come out.
Yes, a music of some sort.
A music, like a rhythm, something. It doesn't have to be necessarily an art. A lot of people think it could be some like type of engineering thing. But even engineering, everything about is in its own way a rhythm. It's an art. It's a beautiful expression of the potential of the cosmos. Everything in this entire universe is an art. It's a rhythm. It's beautiful. And so to find that, I love that as the kind of like the end piece, because the drinking, it's not just stop drinking. It's not just like, okay, you're going to cut this out.
It's not about the alcohol.
It's not about the alcohol. It's like, you're not going to just be done here. And then like, you're going to like live this kind of sad, like black and white existence. And like, you don't get to really experience. It's really all about stepping into a greater version of yourself and being that. And one of the things you touched on, and I'm going to come back to this because I thought this was really important. When we step into another version of ourselves, we have to leave behind. There is a cost to becoming a better version of ourselves. We have to leave behind the old world that we thought we were getting our needs met in, but we were not. And that's the example of the friends that we were hanging out with. And maybe it's even like our close family, and they are overstepping boundaries that we haven't identified, and we don't realize that it's hurting us. It's really stopping us from living up to our fullest potential. I'll give an example for, with my relationship with my dad. He really meant well in helping guide me to be who I have become, but he would say certain things that would really almost like undercut me when I was stepping into this new version of self. And like people that we love, they don't realize that they're saying these things, and we look up to their opinion, and sometimes they can cut us down. But he would always say like, are you even qualified for that? Are you going to do that? Almost like in a way. But I recognize like that was also his experience, internal projection. And so sometimes you literally have to step away from people you love.
Yes.
In order to become the person you possibly can be. And that's going to be very difficult. And they're not going to understand in the short term. But in the long term, when you start to express yourself, you start to express whatever that music is, whatever that business is, whatever that thing is, you now show back up and they see you as a beacon of light. And sometimes they can be like, they will project and say, who do you think you are now to, be so great and so pious? Which again has happened to me in my relationship, my very intimate relationship with my wife. She thought I was being very spiritually hubris, right? She called it spiritual ego. And I was like, I don't understand, because I had just come back from this retreat that I, saw God and experienced all the beauty of this universe. Yeah. And I was like, why? I don't understand why she doesn't see it. I was like, oh, that's right. Like you can't explain an avocado to somebody that's never eaten an avocado.
Right.
You're like,
they explain color to someone.
Exactly. Like you can't. And so I recognize like, oh yeah, that's the thing. And so when you step out on that journey and start to unpack and start to take away the reason for you to hide. Now you got to feel all the feelings that you've been running from. And the first feeling that you're going to feel is shame. And then underneath that is all the reasons that you feel that you're unworthy, unlovable, all these things. And that's why having a mentor, having a guide like yourself or myself, whatever, is so important. And having accountability to unpack not just the physical steps, but the emotional steps along the path. Because breaking through and getting results that you want in your life and becoming really a healthy individual is a hero's journey. It's very emotional at times, and it can be very challenging, frankly. And so I love the way you brought it all together and really like helping us see that it's not about the alcohol. It never was.
Yeah, it's not about the alcohol. And I say that in a lot of my TikTok videos, right? Like, and I've been able to synthesize it like even deeper. Like, alcohol is the thing we use, our addictions, our pains, those are the things that we use, like the thing outside of ourselves that we're using to try to change the way that we feel inside.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we use to come back home and begin the hero's journey. You know, so it's not about drinking or not drinking, or having fun or not having fun, or socializing at bars or not. It's about this relationship that we've created with something that we know is no longer serving us. And it's the evolution of our consciousness in waking up to finally realize that this thing, it was never about alcohol. It was about the deeper relationship and what that represented. It was the energetic relationship. And so as we remove the thing that was preventing us from moving forward and evolving and growing and expanding our mind, our emotions, our consciousness, our spiritual connection, then we're left to finally work through and deal with and confront and begin the process of.
Yeah. Dude, I love that. I think that, like, what you just described is like kind of the perfect, period at the end of the sentence, because then you can experience life in a totally different way, and you can really like enjoy things when you start to really like go through that path and that process. And so, before we kind of end here and kind of wrap things up, you shared so much wisdom in this and guiding us through the path of like, okay, step 1, step 2, step 3. And I'll ask you a few more questions, but how can people reach out to you? How can they get a part of your program if they're looking to stop drinking?
Yeah, so most of my content and like my brand is on TikTok. So at Stop Drinking Coach on TikTok is where most of my content is. My personal Instagram is at The Stop Drinking Coach. My website is thestopdrinkingcoach.com. My email is support@thestopdrinkingcoach.com.
Awesome. That's perfect. And so if I'm, just a listener and I don't have alcoholism, we'll say that, or I don't claim that I have a problem, can I still use you for my stop drinking or to stop drinking? Like, is that...
Yeah, for sure. I mean, sobriety coaching is kind of my niche, but life coaching and mindset and performance and that whole deal is also something I'm deeply passionate about, and it's all kind of woven together. So you don't have to be at the extreme ends. If you're somebody who's just looking to hit the next level, to optimize, is looking for a deeper level of accountability, you want to break into another level, open to it for sure.
I love that. Yeah. So if you guys looking to stop drinking and start to express yourself, your fullest creative self, what I call your unbreakable self, reach out to Bardia. This has been an amazing conversation.
Yeah, it really has, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah. The last question that I always like to ask, if you could see the world change in any one way, what way would you like to see the world change? And how are you showing up as that?
I think one thing that would, and maybe this is slightly unrelated, I think it should be a requirement that you have to do mushrooms when you turn 21. Just imagine if everybody had the experience.
Did mushrooms. I love that. In a therapeutic sense.
Yeah, in a therapeutic setting.
That's a whole nother conversation we'll have on the next podcast.
Yeah, everybody would chill out a little bit.
Everybody would just experience life quite different if they all did mushrooms. 100% agree. Yeah, that was life-changing for me. So,
but beyond that, like maybe on a more serious note, I think waking up to like realize that like you are not your thoughts. You're the observer of them.
Yeah.
Really tapping into like your consciousness and really like committing and becoming curious about your journey of like mental and emotional regulation. Because if you can better manage your internal state, then you're going to have more agency and control over your life. And I think at the end of the day, that's all we want. We want to have more control to be able to experience a better life and create a better life for ourselves. And I think that fundamentally comes down to that mental and emotional regulation piece.
I love that.
And addictions are things that directly damage that.
Yeah. And we can explore that consciousness through mushrooms.
Certainly. Yeah.
No, but so we're gonna get a lot of comments. Where do I get mushrooms? Don't worry about it, guys. Still class 1, I think.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you again, Bardia. I appreciate you, brother.
Pleasure.
And we'll have you on again, I'm sure. Appreciate all you guys out there for listening and watching. I love you guys, and I'll see you guys in the next episode.
Cool. See you guys.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Unbreakable Man podcast. If you found this episode valuable, then go ahead and leave a 5-star review explaining how this podcast has helped you so more people can find it. If you want to be a part of the Brotherhood, then click the link in the description below. You can also check out the Unbreakable Man experience if you're ready to face a deeper challenge and change your life for the better in just 3 days. All right, guys. Thanks again for listening. I appreciate you. And as always, stay unbreakable.